Good morning. Welcome to the 11/11 celebration. How's everybody doing? Very good. Hey, take a moment. Those funny little blue things are going around where you can register your attendance. We love to know that you were here. So definitely take a moment to fill those things out. We're passing them around. There's a little groovy gift inside there. If you want to take home a CD of some original music that we have written for this service, you're welcome to one of those or two of those. And here we go, a little Joe Walsh to get us going.
Sometimes I kind of have a feeling that I'm living a life of illusion. And why can't we let it be? See through this hole in the wall of confusion. And I can't help the feeling I'm living a life of illusion. A little surprises. Wow, it all seems so logical now. Just one of the better surprises, and it comes with no warning. Nature loves a little surprises. Continual crisis. Let's go. Don't you know it's waste of your day? Caught up in endless solutions that have no meaning, just another hunch based upon jumping silly conclusions. Caught up in endless solutions. It's a wall of confusion. Living a life of illusion.
So good to have Dale Colgrove on the trumpets again, visiting with us. So it seems that way sometimes, that life is illusion. Certainly life is unexpected and unplanned sometimes, but here we find ourselves in the midst of that and trying to make sense out of all of that. Let's stand together as we invite God into our midst and think about what our morning is going to be like together. Let's pray. Holy One, we offer ourselves to you this morning. We are thankful for the opportunity to reflect on what it means to be alive in this world. And sometimes we find ourselves caught up in the illusions that are around us. We're just living moment to moment in prescribed routines. Break us open this morning. Be with us. Open our hearts and minds. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. I hope you all join with us in singing this song. There was one song that a number of years ago, Charles and I sat down and we said, you know what, we need sort of a creation spirituality song. So this is sort of our Zen Methodist creation spirituality Unitarian Universalist song. But the chorus does match well with the theme, so we hope you'll join in with us.
Here we go. We are the rock at the heart of the earth, part of this creation from our birth. And like the rock at the heart of the earth, we move with the turning of time. Let's go. We are moving and reaching, learning, living, and teaching, always changing and completing, and moving with the turning of time. Here we go. We are the water in the flowing river. Every one of us are like givers. And like the current in the flowing river, we move with the turning of time. We are moving and reaching, learning, living, and teaching, always changing and completing, and moving with the turning of time. All right, we are the breath in the flowing winds, giving and taking and giving again. And like the breath in the blowing wind, we move with the turning of time. On a rock in the dark as we spin around the star, turning and circling the place where we are. Every small move, every step we take, we change the world with the choices we make. Oh yeah. Here we go. We are in the fire of the burning sun, with the passionate spirit of what must be done. And like the fire in the burning sun, we must move with the turning of time. Hey, we are moving and reaching, learning, living, and teaching, always changing and completing, moving with the turning of time. We are moving and reaching, learning, living, and teaching, always changing and completing. We're moving with the turning of time. Nicely done, folks. Take a moment and greet each other with grace and peace. Hugs are good. You can grab a seat when you're done greeting, hugging, and all that sort of stuff.
The reading this morning, the first one is from Acts chapter 2. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. Awe came on every one of them, because many wonders and signs were being done by the apostles. All who believed were together and had all things common. they would sell their possessions and goods and distribute to all who had need. They spent much time together in the temple. They broke bread in their homes and ate their food together with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of all the people. And day by day, the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. And then the famous Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. The Lord makes me lie down in green pastures and leads me beside still waters and restores my soul. The Lord leads me in right paths for the Lord's own name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely, goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
We'd like for y'all to sing this next little number with us. Lyrics are in your bulletin, and they're back there. Here we go. Come, Spirit, come and fill us soon. We hunger now to be made whole. We bring our dreams, our joys and fears. Oh, touch us now and hold us near. Verse 2 now. Come, Spirit, come, be with us here, both in our laughter and our tears. Transform us now and give release. Fill us with love and inward peace. Red. Sing it one more time. Come, Spirit, come and fill our soul. We hunger now to be made whole. We bring our dreams, our joys and fears. Oh, touch us now and hold us near. Come, Spirit, come, be with us here, both in our laughter and our tears. Transform us now and give release. Fill us with love and inward peace.
our Kairos moment, our moment of sacred reflection when together we try to speak to and of the divine. Here we believe that God is not just out there somewhere, but here with us and in all of us and in all things. I wrote these words hoping they would be useful to you too. You can close your eyes if it helps. Where is this place, this house of the Lord, where we may dwell our whole lives long? Where's this location where we shall want for nothing? Is it in tall buildings with towering spires and beautiful stained glass windows? Or is it at the water's edge, where smooth stones have come up to the shore waiting to be discovered? Or was it there in the wind, and the trees and leaves shook and rustled? Did we hear it in that great saxophone, or in the laughter of a child? Where is it? Is the house of the Lord only in those pleasant places? Or did we see it this morning on TV in the face of the wailing woman whose son is gone? Or in the nursing home where the old man sits and stares at God knows what? Where are these quiet waters? What are the comforting rod and staff? And how long must we walk in the valley of the shadow of death, looking for still waters to relieve our souls? Holy One, speak to us through each other's lives and stories. Speak to us in the noise of the city, in the quiet of the country. Whisper to us in the dark night, and speak loudly to us and with us in our celebrations. May we be people who bring stillness to roaring storms, and may we find courage to trouble the waters when they've grown stagnant, so fresh water can flow again. May we be people who have courage to face our own pain, and may we walk right into the pain of others and wait there with them. May we be the green grass of peace and joy, and may we restore the souls of the weary even as our own souls are refreshed. And let us find our place at tables with people who used to be our enemies and now they are our friends. Sometimes we fail at all of this, but when one is weak, another is strong. And so may this be the right path of our lives, our whole life through.
Restlessness and raging, you know we stand alone when we're together. So why keep hanging on to things that never stay, things that just just keep stringing along from day to day. All these impermanent things, they're present yet elusive, they're passive yet abusive, they're tearing out the heart in utter silence. All these impermanent things, well, they point in all directions like second-hand reflections. They're leading us to subtle shades of violence. And why keep hanging on to things that never stay? Things that just keep stringing us along from day to day. All these impermanent things, well, they're trying to convince me, baptize my soul against me, purge my mind with honesty and fire. All these impermanent things, well, they all add up to zero, make believe that they're my heroes, and they fill my mind with doubt and false desires. So why keep hanging on to things that never stay? Things that just keep stringing us along from day to day.
Beautiful music. It's such a privilege to have a chance to come and to worship with such great music, and then to be here with such a great community. Today is Good Shepherd Sunday. Did you pick that up? Did you notice that? They call it that. It's typically that traditionally within the church, I guess, because of the text. It's also, in case you didn't know it, Star Wars Sunday. May the 4th be with you. I promised some friends I would do that, so. But for me, it's kind of going to go down, I think, as Paradox Sunday, because it's certainly a Sunday I hadn't planned on, and certainly not where my life was 7 weeks ago, and where my life was headed. But then, if any of you read the blog this last week, you know that John Lennon quote, that life happens while we're making other plans. And that seems to be the case for me today. So it seemed like perhaps a good thing to look at would be paradox, taking a look at the paradoxes in our lives and finding the joy in the midst of that and finding the purpose in the midst of that. And I'm going to share with you very quickly a story that I've told you several times before, but it seemed appropriate. So I'll just give you the quick version. The Rabbi Baal Shem Tov, founder of the Hasidic faith in the 17th century, was said to be dying. And as he was on his deathbed, the disciples gathered, and they wanted to find out what would be that most significant final teaching that he could pass along to them. So he was laying there just gasping for air, and they roused him just long enough, and the smartest, most faithful of all the disciples was next to him, because of course you want the brightest one imparting the most important information. You don't want that getting lost or misinterpreted. So he leaned in and he said, "Rebbe, Master, what is the meaning of life?" And the rabbi, Baal Shem Tov, he opened his eyes, just squinting a bit, looked up at the disciples, said, "Life is like a river." And then he closed his eyes. And so the main disciple there began to ponder on this for a moment, because it seemed so profound and such a rich image. And then he began to pass it along down the way as it went around the bed, and it went out the door, and it went down the hallway, and then it went out the little shack and down the street. And all of them lined up, passing it on to the next person. But by the time, you may have played that telephone game before, you know, and by the time it got to the end, it was, there's a river, there's life, what's he talking about? We don't understand, ask the rabbi, it's confusing. So the question comes back, what does the rabbi mean? What does the rabbi mean? What does the rabbi mean? It comes up the sidewalk, comes up the steps, it goes into the house, round the bed. That front, brilliant, most insightful disciple, a little frustrated, leans over, though, towards the rabbi, shakes him, and of course, it's amazing the guy's still alive, and he opens his eyes at this point. What do you want now? And he says, Rabbi, we don't understand. What do you mean life is like a river? And in his last gasping breath, he says, so maybe it's not. It's a sure thing or not. It seems like life is a paradox sometimes. Just when you think you've got it understood, then something completely surprising, or you find yourselves in the midst of these choices that we don't know exactly what to do. And so I found myself thinking about this theme and the passage that we had for this Sunday, and it was a week ago that I started thinking about it. I was driving to Kansas a week ago, Thursday, the Kansas Storytelling Festival. There were a number of things that I've still have lined up to be doing, and as I was headed to Downs, Kansas. You've been there, right? Anybody been to Downs, Kansas? I was headed to Downs, Kansas. When I looked on the navigation with Siri, you know, I have an iPhone, I talk to Siri all the time, and I said, so how do I get to Downs, Kansas? And she said, head north on I-35 for 410 miles. I mean, she might as well have just said, head north for 7.5 hours and take a left, because that's about where Downs is. So I was driving up there, and I was thinking to myself, I do a lot of things. You have a lot of time, so I do a lot of preparation and thinking, but I'm not so careless that I'm going to just start writing. I play ukulele while I drive. Many of you know that. But that's different. That's different. I don't have to look down. I can stay with the knee and prehensile kneecap. So I was driving up there, and I oftentimes engage Siri. Well, Siri's a great dictation device as well, but sometimes it's just fun to do this. And so I kid you not, I ask questions. And I do this from time to time because I think the programmers or somewhere know that there's people who are doing this, and they just keep changing up the program. So I said, Siri, what do you think about God? And Siri said, humans have religion, I have silicone. Kid you not. I was afraid to ask the next question. I simply hit the little tab at the bottom again, and I said, well, that's kind of awkward. And then she said, I don't think I like the conversation that we're having. And then she said, just kidding. This is true. This is really good. And so then I asked her, have you ever experienced a paradox? And again, I kid you not, she said, I am. Now, you're going to go and do this, aren't you? You're going to do this afterwards. Yeah. Go ahead. Just keep trying. You get some weird stuff from Siri. And I began to think about that, and I thought, well, it is paradoxical. I mean, our technology is paradoxical. We have all of this technology, and yet we're sort of even more alienated from one another as a community. We have all this technology. We seem to be interconnected, and yet at the same time, there's a rise in suicide. There's more depression in our communities and our culture than there has been in the past. I mean, it seems like technology is doing us a favor, and at the same time, it's kind of paradoxically the fact that it's not. And we're not making use of what we have at our hand. And so I'm thinking about all these things as I drive into Downs, Kansas. Now, Downs, Kansas, just to help you understand this place, is 13 miles south of the geographic center of the contiguous United States. So it's 13 miles south of that. I don't know if we have a picture of that up there. Can you see it? I'm not sure if I got that picture up. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, there. I went up there. I went there. Welcome to the center of the U.S. You can get souvenirs in Lebanon, which is about 3 miles just down the road from there. That's it. Didn't really feel like I was at the center of anything, to be honest with you. And then when I drove into Downs, that's the town. It's a one stoplight, one train track, one grocery store right there town. So I pull into this town, and I'm thinking, how in the world is there a major festival supposed to happen here? And then I'm thinking, I got the information wrong, and it must be another town. Or I began thinking, perhaps I just made a mistake and should not have said yes. But then I walked into, and just leave it there for a second, Michael. I walked into that grocery store you saw across the street, and I thought, before I go to the little tiny building where the registration is and tell them I'm here, I'm going to catch my breath, just kind of be positive about this whole thing, just think to myself, this is all right, it's a gig, it's fun, there'll surely be people who will show up at this thing, and I've prepared for all this time here, a day and a half worth of performances. And so I walk into this grocery store to get a soda, and I hear a voice behind me say, Tom? I'm 13 miles from the geographic center of the United States, which is nowhere. And someone says, Tom? And I turn around and I see Kitty. Do you remember Kitty? I do now. Yeah. Brad remembers Kitty. Kitty was a kid at Camp Rainbow, a camp for kids with cancer in Phoenix, Arizona, outside of Phoenix in Prescott, Arizona. My last time to work at that camp after about 12 years was about 7 years ago. Kitty was an amazing, and is an amazing person. You can just see by her smile, you know, this woman, she just lives to make joy regardless of where she is. But why she was in the middle of nowhere in Downs, Kansas made no sense. And the fact that I should run into her in Downs, Kansas made no sense. But we started visiting, and it was so much fun because she said, you know, I've been wanting to talk to you. And we'd kept up on Facebook for a while, but then she kind of fell off of Facebook and literally kind of fell off of the planet. And I said, well, how did you get here? And she said, you know, Shelley, and that was a friend of hers, and they were both involved with the drum groups that I was doing at this camp. She said, Shelley and I, we decided to just travel, and we wanted to get away from Phoenix, so we just started heading west. We were going to go to Florida, but we ran out of gas. And this is where we stopped. And I said, well, so where's Shelley? And she said, well, 4 years ago, she moved to Australia with her boyfriend. And so I said, well, why are you here? And she said, because I couldn't think of anywhere else to go. And she told me that she's been really lonely in a lot of ways. She said, it's kind of a, you know, it's a strange place. There's only 800 people in Downs, Kansas. We talked about her experiences and how, the cancer that she had, and then she became a counselor there. And then I said, well, you got to come to some of the events, you know, that we're doing. But as I thought about running into her, not only was that sort of just serendipitous as well as a little paradoxical in its own right, but just the fact of what she said, I'm here and I have nowhere else to go. I mean, that's one of those paradoxes that's part of our psychic makeup sometimes. We find ourselves in a place, in a work, and in a relationship that's not working, in a community, we find ourselves, and yet we're right in the midst of life and feel like there's nowhere to go. There's no way to make this any different. And I thought, what a paradox herself. Now, paradox is basically two truths or two ideas, right? You're familiar with this. Basically, they both seem like they could be true, both seem logical, but somehow paired together, they make no sense. For example, I'm a compulsive liar. It's true, right? The famous Socrates paradox, which is, I know that I know nothing. How many? I've said that many times myself. Or one of my favorite one is, deep down, he's really a shallow guy. I mean, these are paradoxes, but they're sort of humorous, almost aphoristic, kind of pithy ones. But that's the nature of paradoxes, to pose these two things that could possibly be true, but somehow they're illogical together. And yet, paradox has always been sort of the source of our greatest insights sometimes, because it's in wrestling with paradox that we actually come to know something, that we actually come to gain some new perspective on things. Martin Heidegger, the German philosopher, he had this existential sort of orientation to paradox. He said, we are being toward dying. Everybody feel good now? That's the last part of the sermon. Y'all can head home now. That's what life is. Life is being toward dying. Basically, life is a death sentence. And in reality, it is. In its harshest sort of black and white, existential to be or not to be dimension, life is ultimately going to end in death. It's the paradox. How do we live then? Why do we keep going? But what I want to suggest, though, and get this point early as I can, is that in wrestling with the paradox, in trying to understand and come to know who we are in relation to that paradox, we begin to gain insight that the paradox has to offer us. but we have to be willing to know ourselves. And sometimes what we tend to find ourselves doing is identifying with one side or the other. In fact, it was Carl Jung who had said that if you can sit with a paradox is the greatest tool for wisdom. It is the greatest path towards insight. And it's not surprising because, in that fact that most of our religious traditions have paradoxes as their teaching. The Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu, when he wrote, in order to be empty, in order to be full, in order to be full, you must first be empty. In order to be twisted, you first have to straighten yourself up. The Tao is not the Tao. Anyone who says the Tao is the Tao doesn't know the Tao. Or if you go to look at Jesus' teachings, one of his best teachings from the Gospel of Matthew is that if a man is to save himself or is to find his life, he must first lose his life. If he loses it for my sake, he will find it. Jesus' teachings are full of these paradoxes that don't seem, unless a grain of seed fall to the earth, it cannot bear fruit. So paradoxes are everywhere, and in our own lives we find paradoxes as well. We think in terms of child rearing. That's a paradox, right? I've shared with you before, when you think, my life rearing children was sort of like that old, that TV show, The Outer Limits, when it came on and the screen was going all crazy and the guy comes over and says, don't try to adjust your set, you are no longer in control. That's child rearing, right? And yet there's this paradox that you want to allow freedom. At the same time, you feel like you have to create boundaries, and it's just back and forth. Or where our work lives are sometimes paradoxes, where we find ourselves in the midst of a life of working, but are we working to have a life? Or are we living simply to work? Are we working to be alive, or are we dying to live? We live in these kind of struggles all the time, trying to make sense. But what happens is typically we get bogged down. Now, there's a reason for that, because if you look at the physiology of our brains, the neurobiology, we all have these default neural networks, right? Many of you know about this, but we tend to sort of default to the negative. And the reason for that is probably because biologically we have a survival instinct, and so we try to prepare ourselves for the worst. Now, Linda says I'm a hypochondriac, for example. So she's recommended to Dr. Dewar, one of our doctors, she says, we don't even need to do this procedure, just do a prophylactic autopsy. He's never going to believe that he's okay, just, take him apart so that you can prove it. But the reality is that we get stuck in the negative. We just tend to go to the negative. It's not just that it's easy, it's our nature, it's our biology. We have to consciously make an effort to try and see the positive, to try and train the positive networks. Now, I think that our two texts have something to say to this, and that's what I wanted to share with you before we leave today. The first one, which is Acts, is this wonderful sort of polemic. It's basically sort of a prescription for what the church is supposed to look like. So this is the early church, and Luke, who's supposedly the author, that most people consider him the author of this, as well as the Gospel of Luke. Luke is saying 30 years or so after Christ, written around 62 or 64 AD, the community has come together. The community is worshiping as one. They are reaching out towards those in need. They are praying. They are smiling. They are sharing with each other. They are listening to one another. They are singing songs together. It's this sort of utopian society, a prescription of what the church is supposed to look like. And some actually say it's actually sort of a polemic. He actually wrote it for that perspective. Now, our community here in 1111 is a little bit like preaching to the choir, because in reality, I do feel like we're a very open and supportive and affirming community. And we're willing to struggle together on a lot of different things. That's not generally the nature of the church as a whole. I went from one Christian community to dozens and dozens and hundreds of different denominations and belief systems and orientations to the Christian faith. And we know throughout history, we can look at the Crusades, we could look at how individuals like Hitler had co-opted the church for his purposes, and folks actually identified with these different perspectives. And we find that the church is actually a very conflicted reality. If you think about some of your Sunday school classes that you've ever been in, you realize how tenuous, how fragile this whole idea of community actually is. And I suspect that some here among us have actually experienced firsthand this whole tenuousness, this whole sort of paradox of what the church community is supposed to be like, who've experienced a sense of shame at one time in their lives, in their faith tradition or their community, have perhaps experienced a sense of alienation or a sense of judgment. I mean, there are people who have left the church because of its sense of community or lack thereof. But here we have this polemic. I think community's hard. I think we have to be intentional to be in community. And here's the problem. Because of this paradox, because we always default to the negative, it's hard to know better. You know what I'm saying? It's hard to know better. So an issue arises and you find two sides on that issue. It's hard to know better because we gravitate to what's the normal for us, to that normal neural pattern, and we defend with our lives those two ideas or those two opinions or those two stances on whatever the issue. And we've forgotten that paradox has always been the primary teaching technique of all religious traditions, and Christianity and ours, Jesus' teaching notwithstanding. We don't think about how to do that because we gravitate to what's normal for us. But I want to suggest to you that instead of discussion, we shouldn't be in discussion. We should never be in discussion about things. Ever. No. We should be in dialogue. And dialogue is not discussion. Dialogue is attentiveness. Dialogue is suspension of myself for a while. Dialogue is let me hear you and listen to what you're talking about. And all of us in dialogue with one another. Discussion is one of the fastest roads to dissension and division. Because all it is representing and presenting my ideas and my opinion. It has nothing to do with what Jesus was talking about. If we're going to be Christ to one another, it has to begin with dialogue. And if we're going to be community intentionally, it has to do with dialogue. It has to do with knowing who we are and then forgetting who we are. Not ignoring, not denying, getting us out of the way so that we can be present. And this is what I think Psalms 23 is all about. And I had not thought about it until this week, and it just has changed the way I think about it. And I thought, Sharm, your prayer so beautifully illustrated this as well. I used to always think of, as a minister, of Psalms 23 as the funeral psalm. Or perhaps as the tragic or crisis psalm. You know, you read that psalm at someone's death, or you read that psalm at someone's tragic experience. The Lord is with us, we shall not want. The Lord is my shepherd. It's an encouraging, a comforting psalm. But we always read it that way, and I've discovered that that's not what the psalm is really about. Or at least maybe not completely what it's about. Because you get down to that part, and it didn't make any sense to me. You get down to the place where the psalmist says, you prepare a feast for me. You prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. Now, true, the Old Testament Deuteronomic sort of way of looking at life was very judgmental and punitive, and God, it's us versus they. It's very much of a we-they sort of orientation. But I don't think that's Jesus' covenant at all. I think if Jesus fulfilled that covenant in any way, it opened up the possibility of what it can mean to be at the table together. Thou preparest a table for me in the presence of mine enemies. And look, there's chairs. There's extra seats. To me, Psalm 23 is all about life as feast. It's really about the comfort that we can find in the midst of conflict is when we forget about ourselves, when we learn to see who we are, to sit back for a moment, to rest for a moment, to be still and less presumptive, to be open and less determinative, and to wait and to listen. And in that process of knowing ourselves, we can forget ourselves and others can actually come to the feast. It's a reminder that in the midst of all of these paradoxes, in the midst of all of our differences, there is a feast. There is beauty. The challenge, of course, is letting go, forgetting for just a moment. When I went back after the end of the festival, I want to close with this. After the end of the festival, I asked Kitty to come over and to listen to some of the storytellers. And I'll have to tell you about Kevin Kling another time, but she listened to him and just identified with him so much. She thought to herself, I never really thought I could enjoy this kind of stuff. But then she heard her own story being shared in the story of another. And afterwards, I sat down with one of the co-organizers. Didn't know this about the woman. She was one of the organizers of the festival. And I invited Kitty to sit down and eat with us. And this woman lived in this town of 813 people. Kitty lived in the same town of 813 people. You'd think they had known each other. She said, oh, I saw you at the grocery store all the time. I see you there back behind the counter. But for some reason, this woman never thought it would be appropriate or any reason for her to get to know Kitty. And Kitty, of course, being who she is, and she's very strange. And if you look at the rest of her, she's just covered in tattoos. And she's an interesting person to be in the middle of Downs, Kansas, near the geometric center of, But so she doesn't look like somebody you might just want to saddle up next to. But we all sat down at the table, started eating. And something led to something which suddenly led to the fact that the woman, her daughter, who was, I guess, 43, had died 4 months ago prior to the festival of breast cancer. And Kitty said she was sorry to hear that and knows what that's like because she had had cancer. And all of a sudden, these two people had found a friend in the midst of what had been a darkness in their life, what had been a true mirror of the most difficult and real paradox which we all face, which is simply life always is in the shadow of death. And yet, here was somebody who knew that with her. So I left after a little while, and they visited for a while longer, and then I was packing up about an hour after that and getting ready to drive back here all night. And so as I was leaving, it was about 5 o'clock, and Kitty chased me down, and she said, Tom, this was so amazing. She said, I don't know why. I never thought to meet this person. She's a wonderful lady. And she said, we just had such a great time. And she said, it's so neat that we ran into each other. And she said, I know you're a minister. She said, I guess you would consider this kind of a God thing, one of those sort of like divine intervention type things. And y'all know me. I looked at her and I said, Kitty, they're all God things. The feast is always there. It's just whether or not we can stop long enough to let go long enough and invite everyone else to enjoy it. Will you stand with me? I'd like to offer a blessing before we close with this last song, this wonderful Macy Gray song, and hope you'll sing along on the chorus with it. We'll take one another's hands, if we will, and we'll have a closing prayer. And then I invite you to stick around and then leave after you've danced a little while. Let us pray. Holy One, we find ourselves living in routines, moving from day to day, doing the same thing. Every now and then, we're surprised by sudden beauty. We're surprised by a sudden insight. Sometimes these are difficult. Sometimes our lives seem overwhelmed, and it seems hard to find those moments. But there is beauty all around, O God, and we give thanks that you have prepared this table in our midst, in the midst of our conflicts, wherever we find ourselves, at work, in family, among friends, or in the society around us. The feast is always there. May we be hospitable with your feast as you have shared it with us. Amen.
That's great opening service. What a
Well, I talk about is what's going down, what's been messed up for us. When I look around, I see blue skies, I see butterflies for us. Listen to the sound and listen all the sweet music and dance with me. 'Cause there is beauty in the world, so much beauty in the world, always beauty in the world, so much beauty in the world. So shake your booty, boys and girls, for the beauty in the world. Pick your diamond, pick your pearl, there is beauty in the world.
Yeah.
We need more love and oh, we need more money. They say change is gonna come like the weather. They say forever. They say when we're in between, we say blue skies. Notice butterflies. Oh, won't you notice me? Stop and smell the flowers and listen, oh, sweet music and dance with me. 'Cause there is beauty in the world, so much beauty in the world, always beauty in the world, so much beauty in the world. Oh, shake your booty, boys and girls, for the beauty in the world. Pick your diamonds, pick your pearls, there is beauty in the world. Say now. Oh, hey, yeah. Throw your hands up and holler, hey, yeah. Oh, when you don't know what to do, don't know if you'll make it through. Remember, God is giving you all the beauty in the world. So
Beauty in the world.
oh,
Beauty in the world. There is beauty in the world.
Yes, there is beauty in the world. We'll shake our booties, boys and girls, for the beauty in the world. Oh, pick your diamonds, pick your pearls. There is beauty in the world.
There is beauty
In the world, so much beauty in the world. Oh, there's beauty in the world.
So much beauty in the world.
Well, you
Shake
can
your
shake your booty and you will see the beauty. Diamond, pick your pearl. There is beauty in the world. Well, there is beauty.
We're glad you all were here this morning, and we hope you'll stick around. They're going to play for a little longer, so I know some of you are a little self-conscious, but you might want to just move and dance a little bit. If you're visiting with us, come back and see us in the back. We have a CD for you. If you have questions about 1111, we'll be back there. We'd love to talk to you as well. I think we do have a few visitors. Bless you, and don't forget to look for the beauty. Y'all can leave whenever you're ready to. Stick around and dance.
There is beauty